Hello, and welcome back to Velvet Haunt. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that linger in the velvet dark, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, I started working at the factory because the pay was better than anything else I could find nearby. That was really the only reason. I had never dreamed about working in manufacturing, and there was nothing especially interesting about the place when I first saw it. The factory sat on the edge of an industrial estate, surrounded by warehouses, storage yards, and old brick buildings that all looked almost exactly the same. There was a bus stop outside, a small parking lot, and a faded company logo above the main entrance. The factory made luminous emergency signs, fire exits, stairwell markers, evacuation arrows, emergency route signs, the glowing symbols you see in office buildings, schools, hospitals, apartment blocks, and underground stations. They were the kinds of things most people never paid attention to. You might walk past the same green exit sign every day for years without really seeing it. Then, the power goes out. Suddenly, that little glowing arrow is the most important thing in the building. At first, I actually liked thinking about that. It made the job seem useful. My part of the process was simple enough. Blank signs arrived at my workstation in stacks. I painted the letters, arrows, and symbols using a thick, luminous paint. The paint was pale and almost creamy when it was wet, though under certain lights it had a slight green tint. Once I finished painting a batch, I left the signs on racks to dry. After that, we slid them beneath a row of powerful ultraviolet lamps. The lamps were bright enough that looking directly at them hurt your eyes. Every sign stayed under the lights for about 10 minutes. That process charged the luminous material. Afterward, we carried each sign to a dark inspection cabinet. We closed the door, looked through a small viewing window, and checked that the sign glowed evenly. If there were dark areas, weak letters, or badly painted edges, the sign was rejected and sent back. The work was repetitive, but it was easy. Once you got used to it, you could almost do it without thinking. Paint, dry, ultraviolet light. Inspection cabinet. Stack, repeat the paint, had a strange chemical smell. I noticed it on my first shift. It was difficult to describe exactly. The closest comparison I could think of was wet plaster mixed with burnt rubber. Not strong enough to make you immediately sick. Just noticeable. It stayed in the air around the painting area and settled into your clothes by the end of the day. During training, one of us asked if we should be worried about breathing it. The supervisor smiled. It's water-based, she told us. No different from decorating paint. That seemed good enough. We were given plastic aprons. We were told to wash our hands before eating or drinking. There were boxes of disposable gloves in the storeroom, but our manager did not like us using them. He said the gloves made it harder to control the brushes, when one new worker wore gloves for her entire first week. The manager kept making comments about how slowly she was painting. Eventually, she stopped wearing them. Nobody wore masks. There were a few ventilation fans in the ceiling, but they were old and noisy, and I never knew how much air they actually moved. The paint got everywhere. There was no avoiding it. It collected underneath our fingernails. It dried on our sleeves. We found tiny spots of it in our hair. Sometimes I would go home, take a shower, and still find pale marks on my wrists the next morning. We started joking about it. Everyone who worked there long enough had paint on something they owned: phones, handbags, coats, shoes, lunch boxes. One afternoon, Lucy accidentally put her hand inside the dark inspection cabinet while checking a sign. She immediately started laughing. Look, the rest of us crowded around. The skin around her fingernails was glowing, not brightly, just enough to see a faint green outline around the edges. She moved her fingers around in the darkness. I'm one of the signs now. We laughed. Someone told her we should hang her above the emergency exit. Another person joked that she would never get lost during a blackout. The glow disappeared within seconds after Lucy pulled her hand out of the cabinet. Nobody thought about it again. Why would we? Paint glowed. Paint got on our hands. It seemed obvious. Lucy was the first person who became seriously ill. At first, she only complained about headaches. She said they started behind her eyes and became worse during the afternoon. We blamed the ultraviolet lights. They were extremely bright, and after a long shift, almost everyone had tired eyes. Then, Lucy started complaining about a metallic taste. She said it was there all the time. Water tasted strange. Coffee tasted strange. Even toothpaste tasted like she had a coin in her mouth. A few weeks later, her gums started bleeding. Not heavily, just enough that she noticed blood when she brushed her teeth. Her doctor ran some basic tests and told her she was probably anemic. Lucy bought iron tablets. For a while, that seemed to settle everyone's nerves. Then, Nadia started complaining about pain in her wrists. She said it became worse whenever she spent too much time near the ultraviolet lights. Elaine developed a red rash across the backs of both hands. One of the women on the morning shift began vomiting before work. She blamed the smell of the paint. Someone else said she was probably pregnant. She wasn't. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. At the time, they seemed unrelated. People get headaches. People develop rashes. People get tired. Factories are uncomfortable places. We worked long hours. Some of us did overtime. A lot of us lived on cheap food, energy drinks, and too little sleep. I did not feel completely healthy either. I started getting headaches more often. After long shifts, there was sometimes a strange tightness in my chest. Nothing severe, just enough that I would take deeper breaths on the walk home. Some mornings, I woke up with the same metallic taste Lucy had described. I remember standing in my bathroom one morning, brushing my teeth, tasting metal, and thinking that maybe the pipes in my apartment were old. That was how little I suspected the factory. None of us made the connection. Why would we? Management had told us the paint was safe. The products were being installed in hospitals, schools, public buildings, railway stations. We told ourselves that no company could possibly use dangerous chemicals in emergency signs designed to protect people. It seemed ridiculous. Then, 3 workers called in sick during the same week. That got management's attention. They called a meeting at the end of our shift. The factory manager stood in front of us holding several printed pages. He wore a clean shirt and tie, even though most of us were covered in dried paint. He told us the company had investigated our concerns. According to him, the factory had passed every required safety inspection. Air quality was normal. The ultraviolet equipment met legal standards. The paint had been approved for industrial use. He said there was no evidence connecting anyone's symptoms to the workplace. A lot of seasonal illness is going around, he said. He looked down at his papers. We also believe dehydration and poor diet may be contributing factors. There was some uncomfortable shifting among the workers. The manager continued. Some of you are working long hours. Please remember to take care of yourselves. That was the end of the meeting. A few days later, they installed a water cooler beside the break room. That was the only change. No new protective equipment, no masks, no stronger ventilation, no medical examinations, just a water cooler. Lucy did not come back after her next doctor's appointment. She messaged me privately. Her white blood cell count was dangerously low. Her doctor had admitted her to hospital. She tried to make the message sound casual. She even added a smiley face. I told her to keep me updated. I expected her to be back within a week or two. Instead, a week later, the power went out. It happened near the end of the afternoon shift. We had just finished activating a large order of emergency signs for a new railway station. Hundreds of signs were spread across the worktables and drying racks. The ultraviolet lamps switched off first. There was a loud click. Then the machinery stopped. A second later, the main lights died. Everything went black. For a moment, the factory was completely silent. Then the signs began glowing. Everywhere, arrows, running figures, exit lettering, stair symbols, emergency route markers. Hundreds of pale shapes appeared in the darkness. The room filled with a weak green glow. It was actually beautiful for about 3 seconds. Someone laughed nervously. At least we know they work. Another laugh came from across the room. Then everyone stopped. We could see her teeth. The woman who had laughed was standing between 2 tables. Her mouth was open. Every tooth glowed faintly green, not brightly, not like the signs, but enough that we could clearly see the shape of her smile floating in the darkness. Nobody spoke. She closed her mouth. The glow disappeared behind her lips. Next to me, Elaine whispered, "What the hell?" I turned toward her. Her teeth were glowing, too. Elaine raised one hand to her mouth. That was when I noticed the light beneath her skin. Thin green lines were visible inside her fingers. She stared at them. Nadia lifted both hands. Her fingertips were glowing. Someone screamed. As our eyes adjusted to the darkness, more shapes became visible. People, not just their faces, parts of their bodies. Faint glowing lines ran through wrists, hands, forearms. One woman pulled up her sleeve and started crying when she saw the outline of bones beneath her skin. Another worker lifted her shirt slightly and screamed. Her ribs were glowing. Then we looked at Margaret. Margaret had worked at the factory longer than almost anyone else, nearly 5 years. She stood near the back wall. For a moment, I did not understand what I was seeing. Then my stomach turned. I could see most of her skeleton. Her hands glowed brightly. So did her wrists. Her jaw was clearly outlined beneath her face. Several ribs were visible through her shirt and apron. The bones in her forearms looked like pale green sticks under her skin. Margaret slowly looked down at herself. Then she began to cry. Not scream, not panic, just cry. Quietly, like she already understood something the rest of us had not yet accepted. I raised my own hands. Thin green lines marked the bones inside my fingers. I remember staring at them and thinking they looked like an X-ray. Then the truth hit me. The paint had not simply stained our skin. Something in it had entered our bodies, little by little, day after day, through our hands, through the air, maybe through food we touched, maybe through the tiny cuts everyone gets without noticing. It had accumulated inside us, and whatever chemical made the signs glow seemed to prefer our teeth and bones. The ultraviolet lights had been charging it every day. That explained why we never saw it before. By the time our shifts ended, the glow had already started fading. By the time we got home and went to sleep, there was nothing visible. But during the blackout, the factory had gone completely dark only seconds after we had finished working beneath the ultraviolet lamps. We were still fully charged. That word makes me sick even now. Charged, like batteries, like emergency signs. The emergency lighting in the factory never switched on. That should have happened automatically. Instead, a door opened at the far end of the room. A flashlight beam appeared. The factory manager walked in. 2 supervisors followed him. He slowly swept the flashlight across us, across the tables, across the glowing workers. When the beam passed over his face, I saw his expression. Fear, but not surprise. That difference changed everything. "Everyone remain where you are," he said. Nobody moved. "The backup system will be restored shortly." Margaret stared at him. Then she stepped forward. "You knew." The manager raised one hand. "Please stay calm. You knew." "Margaret, you knew what this stuff was doing to us." The manager shook his head. "That isn't what's happening." Then he said something he should never have said. "Most of you are still below the treatment threshold." Silence. Complete silence. Even the crying stopped. Nadia spoke first. "What treatment threshold?" The manager's face changed immediately. He knew he had made a mistake. "What did you just say?" Nadia asked. He started backing toward the exit. Margaret moved first. She lunged at him. One supervisor grabbed her. The others shouted for everyone to stay where they were. Then the room exploded into panic. People screamed. Tables were shoved aside. Someone threw a paint container. Workers grabbed their phones and started recording. One supervisor ran to the main exit and tried to lock it. That made everything worse. People began pushing toward the doors. Someone shouted that we were being trapped inside. Then Elaine collapsed. She hit the concrete floor hard. Her whole body shook. She started coughing violently. The glow around her jaw suddenly became brighter. Then the green light spread down her neck, across her upper chest. She screamed between coughs. There was blood on her lips. Someone called an ambulance. 3 of us rushed the exit. A supervisor tried to stop us. Margaret punched him. Someone else grabbed the door. Together, we forced it open. Cold evening air rushed inside. Workers poured out into the parking lot. Several people collapsed before reaching the gates. One woman vomited beside a delivery truck. Another sat on the pavement, with blood running from her mouth. The company later claimed they had tried to stop us from leaving because they were worried about contamination. I never believed that. I think they were worried about witnesses. Emergency services arrived within minutes. By then, the story could not be contained. Paramedics saw glowing workers. Police officers saw us. People in nearby factories came outside and recorded videos. Someone must have uploaded footage because it spread online before the company could stop it. The ambulances took us to hospital. We were immediately separated from other patients. At first, the doctors had no idea what they were dealing with. Neither did the toxicology teams. They asked us what chemicals we used. We gave them the product names. The hospital contacted the manufacturer. That was when the next problem appeared. The official product sheets did not accurately list the chemical contents. Several substances had not been disclosed. One of them was especially dangerous. It had apparently been designed to bind permanently to mineral structures. That sounded technical when the doctor first explained it. Then he said it more simply. Bones, the chemical was designed to attach itself to material similar to bone. Our bodies had been absorbing it. Our teeth and skeletons had become storage sites. The hospital staff washed us repeatedly. Our work clothes were removed and sealed in special containers. Anything we had carried inside the factory was taken away. Phones, shoes, bags, jewelry, some of it we never got back. They gave us medication intended to pull as much of the chemical as possible from our blood. The treatment made me violently sick. For days, I could hardly keep water down. The hospital kept our rooms dim. Bright light made the pain worse. At first, I did not understand why. Then, one of the doctors explained that certain wavelengths of light could still activate the material inside us. The first time, a nurse accidentally switched on a bright examination lamp above my bed. Pain shot through my teeth and fingers so sharply that I screamed. They turned it off immediately. After that, everyone became very careful. The worst cases were terrifying. Some workers needed bone marrow treatment. Others needed surgery. Margaret had absorbed more of the chemical than almost anyone. Years of exposure had allowed it to spread deep into her skeleton. Her blood counts collapsed. Her organs started failing. She died the following week. Lucy died before Margaret. 2 days after the rest of us were admitted, I received the news. Her condition had already been much worse than anyone knew. Her white blood cell count never recovered. I stared at her last message for hours, the one where she had told me she was in hospital. There was still a smiley face at the end. I remembered her putting her hand inside the inspection cabinet. Look, I'm one of the signs now. At the time, we had laughed. I still hear that sentence sometimes. Elaine survived, but the chemical had built up heavily in her jaw. Part of it became badly damaged. Doctors eventually had to remove a section of bone. Nadia spent 3 months in hospital. Whatever happened to her nerves and bones left permanent damage. She still uses a wheelchair. There were others, too. Some recovered. Some never returned to normal. I was one of the lucky ones. I had worked at the factory for less than 6 months. That was probably what saved me. The chemical had entered my body, but most of it had not yet permanently settled deep inside my bones. My blood levels dropped after treatment. My headaches gradually improved. The metallic taste disappeared. The tightness in my chest stopped. After several weeks, I was discharged. I thought that once we were all out of the factory, the truth would come out. I thought people would go to prison. I thought the company would disappear. I was wrong. The company denied knowing that the paint was dangerous. Their lawyers claimed workers had ignored safety procedures. They pointed to the gloves stored in the supply room. They pointed to warning labels about washing our hands. They mentioned ventilation instructions nobody remembered being given. They did not mention that managers had discouraged us from wearing gloves because they slowed production. They did not mention that we had never been given masks. They did not mention the meeting where we were told our symptoms came from dehydration and bad diets. And they certainly did not admit what the factory manager had meant when he said treatment threshold. His lawyers claimed he had been misunderstood. According to them, he had been referring to ordinary first aid procedures during emergencies. None of us believed that. The factory eventually closed. For a while, the gates were locked. The company sign came down. News reporters stopped coming. The building sat empty. 6 months later, it reopened under another name. Different logo, different company registration, same building. I checked. The doctors told me I should continue recovering. They said the remaining chemical in my bloodstream would probably leave my body within about a year. Anything that had not permanently attached to my bones would gradually be removed naturally. They seemed confident. Most days, I believed them. It has been months now. I feel much better. My hands look normal. My gums no longer bleed. I do not get headaches every afternoon. I even started working again somewhere else. An office job this time. Nothing involving paint. Nothing involving ultraviolet lamps. I keep a small flashlight beside my bed, though. I tell people it is because I do not like being caught in the dark. That is partly true. The real reason is that darkness has become a test. Every time the electricity goes out, I wait. Sometimes I stand in front of the bathroom mirror. I open my mouth. Most nights, there's nothing. Just darkness. Normal teeth. Normal skin. Then there are nights when I have spent too much time outside in strong sunlight. Or under bright office lights. Or near one of those ultraviolet lamps used in shops to check banknotes. On those nights, if I step into a completely dark room and stare into the mirror long enough, I can still see them. My teeth. Faint green shapes inside my mouth. Sometimes I can see thin lines along my fingertips, too. They are much dimmer than they used to be. They fade quickly. A few seconds. Maybe less. The doctors say that is a good sign. They say it means less of the material remains active inside me. I want to believe them. I usually do. But sometimes I think about Margaret standing in the dark factory, almost her entire skeleton glowing beneath her skin. 5 years of paint. 5 years of ultraviolet light. 5 years of breathing whatever was floating through that room. And I think about the people who had worked there longer than I did. The ones who became sick before anyone understood why. The ones who were told they were anemic, dehydrated, stressed, eating badly. I wonder how many former workers never connected their illnesses to the factory. I wonder how long management had known. More than anything, I wonder what the treatment threshold actually meant. You do not create a threshold unless you expect people to cross it. You do not have treatment plans unless you already know what the exposure does. The factory manager knew exactly what we were looking at during that blackout. He was frightened, but he was not surprised. That is the part I cannot forget. Sometimes I search for the new company that operates from the old factory. Their website looks professional. They manufacture safety equipment, emergency lighting, reflective markers, luminous signs. The pictures show clean workstations and smiling employees wearing aprons. I cannot tell whether they are still using the same paint. I hope they are not. I have never contacted anyone working there. I have thought about it. What would I say? Wear gloves? Wear a mask? Quit before your bones begin glowing? Most people would think I was insane. Maybe that is why the company was able to reopen. Maybe people will believe almost anything as long as the truth sounds stranger. A few weeks ago, there was a power cut in my apartment building. I had been sitting beneath a bright reading lamp for several hours. Everything went black. I stayed perfectly still. Then I remembered the factory. The tables, the glowing arrows, Margaret crying, Elaine collapsing, Lucy laughing with her fingers inside the inspection cabinet. I walked slowly into the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror. For several seconds, I saw nothing. Then I smiled. A faint green line appeared across my teeth. Dim, barely visible, but still there. I closed my mouth and waited. When I opened it again, the glow had almost disappeared. That should have made me feel better. Instead, I found myself staring at my reflection and wondering how much of that chemical was still buried where no doctor could remove it. The power came back a few minutes later, the bathroom filled with ordinary white light. My reflection looked completely normal. I went to bed and tried not to think about it. But now I notice emergency signs everywhere. At work, in shopping centers, hospitals, train stations. Hotels, I notice how quietly they hang above doors. Nobody looks at them. Nobody thinks about what makes them glow. Nobody wonders who painted them. Sometimes I catch myself studying the pale green letters and wondering which factory they came from. Then I look at the people walking underneath them. People talking, laughing, checking their phones, living normal lives. They do not know how terrifying a glowing emergency sign can become when you have seen the same light shining through a human skeleton. The doctors say I was fortunate. They are right. I worked there for less than 6 months. My teeth only glow faintly now. My fingers almost never do. Those who worked there longer were not so fortunate. Some of them will carry that light inside them for the rest of their lives. And some of them did not live long enough to see it fade. Story 2. I was 11 years old when I died. At least that is the only way I know how to describe what happened to me. Most people cannot tell you the exact moment their life changed forever. They remember important things, of course. Birthdays, weddings, the first person they loved, the first time someone close to them died. But usually, life changes slowly enough that you only understand it later. For me, there was one clear moment, one sound, one tree, one fall. Even now, years later, I can still remember the smell of wet bark against my hands. I can still hear my best friend Jamie laughing from somewhere below me. I can still hear that old oak tree groaning in the summer wind like it already knew what was about to happen. I still dream about that tree. It stood near the edge of Blackwood Forest, behind my grandparents' farmhouse. Nobody knew exactly how old it was. My grandfather said the tree had been there when he was a boy, and his father had told him the same thing. It was enormous. The trunk was wider than 3 adults standing side by side, and the branches spread over the edge of the field like giant twisted fingers reaching toward the sky. Some of the branches were thick enough for 2 kids to sit on together. Every child in the village knew that tree, and every adult told us not to climb it. It's rotten, my grandfather used to say whenever he saw us near it. You kids stay away from that thing. One day it's going to come down. Of course, that only made us want to climb it more. When you are 11, adults warning you about something does not always make it sound dangerous. Sometimes it makes it sound exciting. Every kid wanted to say they had climbed higher than everyone else. That summer, I was determined to be the one who did. The day it happened was bright and warm. The sky was completely blue without a single cloud. The fields around my grandparents' farmhouse were deep green, and insects buzzed around the tall grass. Jamie and I had spent most of the afternoon running through the woods, throwing sticks at each other and pretending we were explorers. Eventually, we reached the oak tree. Jamie looked up at it. "You won't climb to the top," he said. I laughed. "I will, you won't. I will. You'll fall. I won't." I wish I had listened to him. I started climbing. At first, it was easy. The lower branches were huge and strong. I had climbed them many times before, so I knew where to put my hands and feet. Jamie climbed a little way behind me, but eventually he stopped. I kept going. The higher I climbed, the thinner the branches became. The rough bark scraped my palms. Small pieces of wood got under my fingernails. The branches moved slightly beneath my weight. I remember looking down. That was a mistake. Jamie looked tiny. The ground seemed impossibly far away. My stomach twisted, but at the same time, I felt proud. Nobody else had climbed that high. Jamie looked up at me and shouted, "That's high enough." I smiled down at him. Then I reached for one more branch. Just one. I grabbed it with both hands and began pulling myself upward. That was when I heard the sound. Crack, not a small snapping sound. A loud, violent crack. It sounded like a gunshot. The branch dropped beneath my weight. For one impossible second, I felt completely weightless. I remember everything from that second. Birds exploded from the top of the tree, flying in every direction. The sky spun around me. The tree twisted below. I remember thinking, very clearly, that maybe this was what flying felt like. Then the ground rushed toward me. Everything went black. At first, the darkness did not scare me. I thought my eyes were closed. I tried opening them. Nothing changed. I tried again. Still nothing. That was when I realized the darkness was not around me. It was everything. There was no light anywhere. There was no ground beneath my feet, no wind, no tree, no sound. I could not even hear my own breathing. Then I noticed something worse. I could not feel my heartbeat. I called for my mother. "Mum?" Nothing answered. "Mum." My voice sounded strange. It did not echo. It simply disappeared into the blackness. I shouted for my father, then Jamie, then my grandfather. Nobody answered. I screamed until my throat hurt. Still, nothing. Then, finally, something answered. Not with a voice. With breathing, slow, heavy, close, very close. I froze. The breathing came from directly behind me. I felt warm air touch the back of my neck. I spun around. There was nothing there. Only darkness. The breathing stopped. I stood perfectly still. For several seconds, I convinced myself I had imagined it. Then I realized something else. I was sinking. Slowly, at first, it felt like my feet were disappearing into soft mud. I tried pulling one leg free. It would not move. I looked down, even though there was nothing to see. The darkness had reached my ankles. Then, my knees. I struggled. I kicked. I tried grabbing something. There was nothing to hold. The blackness continued rising around me. My waist disappeared. Then my chest. I screamed again. The darkness reached my shoulders. Then, my neck. Just before it reached my mouth, everything changed. Suddenly, I was standing somewhere else. The first thing I noticed was the sky. Except it was not really a sky. It looked like cracked stone stretching forever above me. Thousands of thin fractures covered it. Behind those cracks was a dull red glow, almost like fire burning behind a wall. There was no sun, no moon, no stars. Yet somehow I could see. I was standing inside a forest. But it was nothing like Blackwood Forest. Every tree was dead, not simply leafless. Dead, their trunks were gray and smooth, as if all the bark had been peeled away hundreds of years ago. Their branches were black and thin. Nothing moved. There was no wind, no insects, no birds, no animals, no life. The silence was so complete that after a while it began hurting my ears. I started walking because standing still somehow felt worse. Ash covered the ground like snow. Each step left a clear footprint behind me. I had no idea where I was going. I only knew I did not want to stay where I had appeared. I walked for what felt like a long time, maybe minutes, maybe hours, maybe days. Time did not seem to work properly there. I never became hungry. I never became thirsty. I felt tired, but not in a normal way. Eventually, I saw someone standing between the trees, a woman. Her back was turned toward me. I stopped. For the first time since arriving there, I felt something close to hope. Another person. Someone who might help me. Miss, she did not move. I walked closer. Her dress looked ancient. It was long and dirty, and the bottom dragged through the ash. Are you okay? No answer. I kept moving toward her. Do you know where we are? Still nothing. I was close enough now that I could have reached out and touched her shoulder. I almost did. Before my hand reached her, she turned around. I screamed. Her face was completely smooth. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, only pale skin stretched tightly across where those features should have been. I stepped backward. Even though she had no eyes, I somehow knew she was looking directly at me. Every part of my body told me to run. So I did. I turned and sprinted through the forest. Ash exploded beneath my feet. Branches scratched my arms and caught my clothes. I ran until my chest hurt. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, no branches breaking. That should have made me feel better. It did not, because I knew something was following me. I cannot explain how. I just knew, not quickly, not angrily. Patiently, like it already knew where I would eventually go. I ran until the trees suddenly opened into a huge clearing. I stopped. I wish I had stayed in the forest. Thousands of people stood in the clearing. Men, women, children, old people, young people, all standing perfectly still. Every one of them faced the same direction. None of them moved, none blinked. They looked like statues made from real flesh. I slowly approached the nearest man. He looked maybe 40 years old. Hello? Nothing, I waved my hand in front of his face. He did not react. I stepped closer. Can you hear me? His body remained completely still. Then his eyes moved. Only his eyes. They rolled toward me. I froze. His lips did not move. But I heard a whisper. Don't let it know you're awake. I stumbled backward. Then another whisper came. The exact same words. Then another. Suddenly, every person in the clearing whispered together. Thousands of voices. Don't let it know you're awake. The ground shook. I looked around. Every head in the clearing slowly tilted upward. Not quickly. Not normally. They all moved at exactly the same time. Then something moved beyond the trees. Something enormous. I could not see it. The forest was too thick. But the tops of the dead trees began bending, one after another, as though something impossibly large was pushing through them. The people whispered louder. Don't let it know you're awake. The ground shook again. Then every voice changed. Too late. I ran. I ran back into the forest without knowing where I was going. I did not care. Anything was better than waiting to see what was coming. The trees seemed endless. No matter how long I ran, everything looked exactly the same. Gray trunks, black branches, ash-covered ground, that cracked red sky. Eventually, I heard water. I followed the sound. Then I reached a river. Except the river did not flow along the ground. The water moved upward. It rose from a deep crack in the earth and flowed straight into the sky, disappearing through one of the glowing fractures above. I stopped at the edge. Inside the water were faces, thousands of them. Men, women, children, they floated upward through the river. Their mouths opened and closed. No sound came out. I stared. Then a little girl appeared in the water. She looked about 6 years old. Her hair floated around her face. Unlike the others, she looked directly at me. Then she smiled. Slowly, she moved her lips. 3 words. "It's behind you." I did not turn around. I could not, because I already knew. The breathing had returned. Slow, deep, directly behind my left ear. Warm air touched my neck. I closed my eyes. Please, please do not make me see it. The breathing stopped. Then something touched my shoulder. 1 finger. It was colder than anything I had ever felt. I should not have turned around. But I did. Nothing. The forest was empty. The river continued rising into the sky. There was no creature behind me. No woman. No person. Nothing. Relief rushed through my body. Then I looked down. There were footprints in the ash around me. Not normal footprints. Handprints. Huge handprints. Each one looked as though a hand had been pressed into the ash. The fingers were long, far too long, and each finger seemed to have too many joints. The prints formed a circle around me. Then another circle. Then another. Whatever had made them had walked around me again and again while I stood there with my eyes closed. Watching me. Waiting, that was when I understood something. I had never been alone there. Not once. I do not remember falling asleep. I do not think sleep was possible in that place. One moment, I was staring at those handprints. The next, I opened my eyes. Bright white light filled my vision. Machines beeped around me. I smelled disinfectant. For several seconds, I had no idea where I was. Then someone screamed, "Mum!" He's awake. Everything became noise. People rushed into the room. Doctors, nurses. My mother appeared beside the bed and collapsed into a chair, crying so hard she could barely breathe. My father grabbed me and hugged me. He held me so tightly that my ribs hurt. I tried asking what had happened, but my throat was dry. Someone gave me water. Then I heard the words. "You've been asleep for 4 months." I stared at them. 4 months? That made no sense. I had only been gone for... I stopped. How long had I been gone? Hours? Days? Years? I suddenly realized I did not know. The doctors called it a miracle. They explained that I had fallen from the tree and suffered terrible injuries. I had damaged my head badly. For months, they had not known whether I would ever wake up. My family had been told to prepare for the possibility that I never would. Then, one morning, I simply opened my eyes. The doctors asked me questions. "Do you know your name?" "Yes. Do you know where you are?" "Hospital. Do you remember what happened?" "I fell from a tree." "Can you move your fingers?" I did. "Your toes?" "Yes. Do you recognize your parents?" "Of course." Then, one doctor asked something different. "Did you dream while you were unconscious?" I looked at him. For 1 second, I almost told him everything. The darkness, the breathing, the dead forest, the faceless woman, the frozen people, the river flowing into the sky, the little girl, the thing that had walked around me. Instead, I said one word. "No," the doctor smiled. "That's perfectly normal." No, it was not. Nothing about what happened to me was normal. But I kept quiet. Everyone around me was celebrating. My mother would not stop touching my face. My father kept telling me how happy he was. A nurse adjusted one of the machines beside the bed. Then I noticed someone standing in the corner of the room. A little girl, about 6 years old. My entire body became cold. I knew her. She was the girl from the river. She wore a hospital gown. It was completely soaked. Water dripped from the bottom onto the polished floor. Nobody else reacted. The doctors walked past her. My father looked directly toward the corner and seemed to see nothing. The girl stared at me. Slowly, she raised one finger to her lips. Shh, I could barely breathe. She smiled, not a happy smile, a sad one. Then she whispered, "It's still here." The lights flickered. Every heart monitor in the room suddenly made one long, continuous sound. For 1 second, everything stopped. My mother froze. My father froze. The doctors stopped moving. The nurses became completely still. Nobody blinked. Nobody breathed. They looked exactly like the people in the clearing. Then everything returned to normal. The monitors began beeping again. My mother continued crying as if nothing had happened. A doctor adjusted my blanket. Someone laughed. Nobody reacted. The little girl was gone. I stared at the empty corner. For several seconds, I tried convincing myself I had imagined her. Maybe my brain was damaged. Maybe I was still dreaming. Maybe I had not truly woken up. Then I looked at the floor. Wet marks crossed the polished surface. They began in the corner where the girl had stood. Then they moved toward my bed. At first, they looked like footprints. Then I realized what they actually were. Hands, long, wet handprints, one after another, as though something had crawled from the corner of the room toward me. I screamed. Doctors rushed over. My parents asked what was wrong. I pointed at the floor. "What?" my father asked. "The prints. What prints?" I looked again. They were gone. I told nobody what I had seen. Not then, not for years. My family already thought I had been given a second chance at life. I did not want them thinking I had come back wrong. For months after leaving the hospital, I was terrified of sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I expected to wake beneath that cracked red sky. Sometimes I dreamed about the forest. Sometimes I heard the breathing. Sometimes I woke because I felt warm air against the back of my neck. My parents blamed nightmares. The doctors blamed trauma. I tried believing them. Eventually, life became normal again. Or as normal as it could. I returned to school. I learned to walk properly again. The scars from the accident slowly faded. Jamie visited me constantly. For a long time, he blamed himself because he had dared me to climb higher. I told him it was not his fault. I had chosen to climb. For years, neither of us went near the oak tree. Then, when I was 17, Jamie told me something strange. He said that after I fell, while he was waiting for adults to arrive, he thought he saw someone standing beside the tree. A woman. I asked what she looked like. He said he could not really remember, only that she wore a long, dirty dress. I never told him about the faceless woman. Not then. The old oak tree finally came down during a storm when I was 19. My grandfather called me the next morning. He said lightning had split it. When workers removed the broken trunk, they found something beneath the roots. Bones, human bones. Very old. Nobody knew who they belonged to. Some people said they were probably centuries old. Maybe someone had been buried there before the village grew around the forest. I tried not to think about it. But that night, I dreamed about the faceless woman again. She stood where the tree used to be. She did not move. She did not need eyes to watch me. I woke with mud beneath my fingernails. After that, I stopped pretending the things I saw were only dreams. I am much older now. I have built a normal life. I work, I pay bills, I meet friends, I laugh. I act like everyone else. Most days, I can almost forget what happened. Almost, but sometimes I see things. A little girl standing across the street in heavy rain. A pale woman reflected in a dark shop window. People on a train suddenly becoming completely still for half a second. Sometimes, in crowded places, I hear thousands of voices whispering underneath the normal noise. Don't let it know you're awake. The worst nights are the ones when I wake at exactly 3:17 in the morning. I always wake lying on my back. The room is completely silent. Then I feel it. Warm breath against my left ear. I never turn around anymore. I learned that lesson. I keep my eyes closed. I stay perfectly still. I pretend I am asleep. Usually, after a minute or two, the breathing disappears. Last night was different. I woke at 3:17. The breathing was there. I stayed still. Then, something touched my shoulder. One cold finger. I did not move. Another finger touched me. Then another. Slowly, something placed an entire hand against my shoulder. The fingers were too long. I could feel too many joints pressing through my shirt. Then a little girl's voice whispered from the darkness beside my bed. It's learning. I opened my eyes. Nobody was there. But on the wall beside my bed was a wet handprint. Long fingers. Too many joints. And underneath it, written in water as if someone had traced the letters with one dripping finger, were 4 words. You should have stayed. I did not sleep again. This morning, I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. For a moment, my reflection did not move when I did. It simply stood there, watching me. Then it smiled. I did not. Behind my reflection, the bathroom was gone. For less than a second, I saw dead gray trees, ash, a cracked red sky. Then the mirror returned to normal. I have spent my whole life telling myself that I survived that fall, that I came back, that doctors saved me, that I was given another chance. But lately, I have started wondering whether that is true. Maybe I never escaped that place. Maybe my body woke up in the hospital, but some part of me stayed behind. Or maybe something followed me when I came back. Something patient. Something that has spent all these years learning how this world works. Learning my home, my family, my dreams. Learning how to touch me. And if that is true, then the most frightening thought is not that I died when I was 11. It is that maybe death was supposed to keep that thing on the other side. Maybe I opened a door when I fell from that tree. Maybe waking up closed it before whatever was following me could come through completely. But doors do not stay closed forever. Sometimes they crack open. Sometimes something reaches through. And sometimes, late at night, when the room is silent and I hear slow breathing behind me, I remember the warning from all those frozen people. Don't let it know you're awake. So I do not move. I do not speak. I do not turn around. Because now I finally understand what they were warning me about. It was never trying to kill me. It was trying to find out where I went. And after all these years, I think it finally has. Story 3. I'm typing this on my phone in complete darkness, with the brightness turned down as far as it will go. I'm sitting under a thick, rough wool blanket in the exact center of my living room floor. I can't turn on any lights. If I flip a switch, even for a second, the light will reflect off the windows. If that happens, it will know exactly where I am. Right now, darkness is the only thing keeping me alive. At least I think it is. I need advice quickly because the sun disappeared behind the trees about an hour ago, and the sounds have started again. A month ago, I thought I had made the best purchase of my life. I bought the old St. Jude's Rectory. It is a huge Victorian house at the edge of a forest outside a small town called Blackwood Valley. The Catholic diocese abandoned the property sometime in the 1970s, and nobody had really maintained it since. That was why it was so cheap. The place needed an unbelievable amount of work. The roof leaked in several places. Some of the pipes were almost useless. The plaster was cracked, the old glass in the windows was warped, and every hallway seemed to have a cold draft, no matter how warm it was outside. But I loved it. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, and I've always liked being alone. A giant old house surrounded by forests seemed perfect. No traffic, no neighbors, no children screaming outside, no construction. Nothing but me, my computer, and more rooms than I knew what to do with. The rectory shares an old gravel driveway with St. Jude's Church, which sits around 100 yards away through thick pine trees and overgrown bushes. The church is completely ruined now. Its stone tower collapsed years ago, leaving part of the spire sticking above the trees behind the house. From certain angles, it looks like a giant broken tooth covered in poison ivy. The first 2 weeks were peaceful. The only thing that bothered me was the smell. There was always something strange in the air. I opened windows whenever the weather allowed it, but the smell never completely disappeared. It was difficult to describe. Part of it smelled like damp soil from an old basement. There was also something greasy and burned, almost like candle wax or old animal fat. Underneath that was a metallic smell. Copper, like holding a handful of old pennies. I blamed it on the age of the building. The rectory had been sitting mostly closed for decades. There was probably mold somewhere. Maybe old pipes. Maybe dead animals in the walls. I told myself there were 100 normal explanations. I set up my office on the 3rd floor in what had once been an attic. It was a beautiful room, despite everything. The ceiling was high and angled, and there was one enormous arched window overlooking the graveyard. Past the graves, I could see the remains of St. Jude's Church through the trees. During the day, the view was amazing. At night, I usually kept the curtains closed. By the 3rd week, the silence inside the rectory started bothering me. It wasn't normal silence. I know that sounds strange, but sounds seem to behave differently inside the house. If I dropped something upstairs, there was no echo. A screwdriver hitting the floor didn't create the sharp metal noise you would expect. It made a flat, dead sound. Thud. Then, nothing. It was almost as if the walls were absorbing everything. Sometimes I would stand in the hallway and clap just to test it. The sound would die almost immediately. Instead of feeling peaceful, the house started feeling heavy, like it was listening. One afternoon, I decided to explore the cellar. I had only been down there once since moving in. It was huge, much larger than the footprint of the kitchen made me expect. The floor was mostly packed earth, and the walls were made from rough stone. The air down there was freezing, even though it was the middle of summer. Under an old wooden workbench, hidden behind rusted tools and broken shelves, I found 2 large metal trunks. They were heavy enough that I had to drag them into better light before opening them. Inside were old church records. Most of them were boring. Donation records, baptism papers, old Latin prayer books, letters from the diocese, receipts, documents damaged by water and insects. Then I found the journal. It was wrapped in a stained white cloth that had probably once been used on the church altar. The book itself was thick, with a black leather cover that was peeling around the edges. The name written inside belonged to Father Thomas, the final priest who lived at St. Jude's before the parish closed in 1975. At first, his journal was disappointingly normal. He complained about the roof. He worried about the heating bill. He wrote about older members of the congregation dying and younger families moving away. He mentioned that donations were dropping. The boiler kept failing. The winters were becoming harder for him. Normal things. But as I continued through the journal, the handwriting changed. Father Thomas started with beautiful, neat cursive. Later, the letters became uneven, then messy, then almost violent. Some words were written so hard that the pen had nearly torn through the paper. There were ink stains everywhere. Several entries looked like they had been written by someone whose hands were shaking. One entry from his final spring made me stop reading for several minutes. He wrote that the seal of confession was absolute. Anything someone told a priest inside the confessional had to remain secret. But then he asked a question. What happened to sins that were too horrible to forgive? What happened to terrible things people whispered inside that little dark box? According to Father Thomas, they didn't disappear. He believed the sins stayed. They attached themselves to the church. They remained in the stones. They moved through the grass. They gathered around the rectory at night. He wrote that he could hear something scraping against the walls after sunset. Then came the sentence that stayed in my mind. They are heavy. They want a chest to sit in. They want a mouth to speak through. I actually laughed when I read that. Not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh people make when something makes them uncomfortable and they don't know what else to do. I decided Father Thomas had probably been lonely. Isolation can destroy people. Maybe the priest had spent too much time alone in an old house and slowly started losing his grip on reality. I took the journal upstairs. I left it on the corner of my desk. I wish I had burned it. Or better yet, left the entire cellar alone. Blackwood Valley is the kind of town people don't really move to. People are born there. They stay there. And sometimes they spend their whole lives trying to leave, but never do. The lumber mill shut down in the late 1960s, and the town never really recovered. There are abandoned businesses along the main road, old houses leaning into the weeds, families who have known each other for generations. Everyone knows everybody, or at least everyone knows something about everybody. As I kept reading Father Thomas's journal over the next few days, I realized St. Jude's had once been more than just a church. It had been the place where everyone brought the things they wanted hidden. Father Thomas never wrote names. He respected the rules of confession, even in his private journal. But he described pieces of what people told him. One farmer confessed that he had watched his own brother sink into the mud of a marsh and had chosen not to help him. A respected councilman admitted to setting fire to another man's barn while animals were still trapped inside. There were darker things. Children who disappeared. Violence inside families. People poisoned and their deaths explained away as illness. The more I read, the more the journal stopped feeling like a priest's diary and started feeling like a record of everything rotten beneath the town. One entry from June 1975 described people coming to confession every Saturday. They would enter the dark wooden box, whisper what they had done. Father Thomas would give them prayers to say. Then they would walk outside feeling clean again. But Father Thomas said the weight didn't leave. It stayed behind. He claimed the church floor creaked under something that could not be seen. The sanctuary smelled like copper and rancid fat. Then, during Mass, he saw a shadow behind the altar. It didn't belong to any person or object. It was tall and hungry. Father Thomas wrote that it seemed to be feeding on everything people refused to say. By the end of that summer, people stopped attending St. Jude's. Not because the town suddenly became less religious. People simply said the church felt wrong. That was the word repeated in several later newspaper interviews I found. Wrong. By August, Father Thomas was mostly alone. Even the grocery delivery boy stopped coming directly to the property. He left food near the road instead. During a summer storm, the power failed. For some reason, the diocese never repaired it. St. Jude's was simply allowed to disappear into the woods. And decades later, I came along and thought I had found a bargain. 2 days ago, the silence became too much for me. I decided I needed proof that Father Thomas had been imagining things. I drove into Blackwood Valley and visited the municipal library. The building smelled almost as old as the rectory. The carpets were damp. The walls had stains near the ceiling. Everything smelled like paper, dust, and vinegar. An elderly woman named Martha worked in the archives section. I asked her about St. Jude's and Father Thomas. She had been sorting old index cards. The second I mentioned the church, her hand stopped. She looked at me for several seconds. Then she asked where I lived. When I said I had bought the old rectory, her face changed. Not surprise. Fear, she pulled her cardigan tighter around herself and pointed toward a shelf containing local records from the 1960s and 1970s. Then, she told me, people in Blackwood didn't talk about what happened at St. Jude's. She said after Father Thomas stopped coming into town, the bishop sent a young deacon to check on him. The deacon found the church doors chained shut from the inside. Every window in the rectory had been broken. The strange part was the direction of the glass. The windows had not been smashed inward by stones. The pieces were scattered outside. Something had broken them from inside the house. Martha described it as though something inside had become too large for the rooms. Then she walked away and left me alone. I spent almost 3 hours reading old copies of the Blackwood Gazette. There was no obituary for Father Thomas. No real police investigation. Nothing explaining what happened to him. Instead, there was a short announcement from the diocese stating that St. Jude's Parish had been spiritually deconsecrated because of an uncontainable blight. I had never heard language like that in an official church notice. Then I found something else. Inside an old county property ledger was a loose sheet of paper. It appeared to be a police report that had never been properly filed. The date was October 14th, 1975, exactly 50 years ago. According to the report, a deputy had gone to the rectory after receiving a call. He never entered. He wrote that when he approached the front porch, the air became so cold he could barely breathe. Then he saw someone standing behind a second-floor window. The figure looked like a man wearing a Roman collar. It didn't move. It only watched. The final note was written by the sheriff. Do not send men back up St. Jude's Lane. Let the dark keep what it took. I drove home feeling sick. The trees on both sides of the road seemed to curve above the car like ribs. When I walked back into the rectory, I noticed something I had somehow missed. Every ground floor window had tiny iron hinges near the top. The windows were designed to swing outward, not slide, swing outward. I remember thinking of Martha's story about the broken windows. It felt as though the people who built the house knew something might eventually need to escape. After that, the rectory started changing. Or maybe I had finally started noticing what had always been there. The first major problem was the water. The bathroom sink on the second floor started producing brown water. It smelled disgusting. Not like rust, not sulfur. It smelled like stagnant pond water, old hair, and something rotting. I taped the drain shut. Then I called a plumber from another town. He was completely normal until I gave him the address. I said Old St. Jude's Rectory. There was silence. Then he hung up. I called again. He never answered. After that came the sounds. I would be working in my office and hear the front door slam downstairs. I'd go down to check. The deadbolt would still be locked. The security chain still in place. Nobody had entered. One night around midnight, I was cooking an egg in the kitchen when I heard footsteps above me. Heavy, slow, unhurried, someone was walking across the second-floor hallway. Along with the footsteps came a dragging sound. Scrape, step, scrape, step. It sounded like thick cloth rubbing against the wooden walls, like someone wearing a long wool coat. I stood beneath the ceiling holding a spatula. The footsteps moved toward the master bedroom. Then they stopped. For almost 2 full minutes, nothing happened. Then the sound simply disappeared. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood expands, pipes move, walls shift. I told myself I was tired and needed a break. I decided I would pack a bag the next morning and spend a few days in the city. I never got that chance. Last night, around 2 in the morning, a huge thunderstorm rolled through Blackwood Valley. Lightning flashed almost constantly. Rain hammered the roof. I was working late in the attic office. My 2 computer monitors were the only lights on. Then I heard something hit the window. Tap, 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 3 clear knocks. Not rain, not a tree branch. Knuckles, human knuckles, against glass. I froze. My office window is about 30 feet above the ground. There is no balcony, no fire escape, no ledge. The exterior wall drops straight down to a concrete patio. The nearest tree is too far away for any branch to reach the window. Nobody could stand there. I whispered to myself that it was a bird. Maybe a bird had become confused during the storm. Maybe it had flown into the glass. I stood from my chair. My knees were shaking. I took a few steps toward the window. Suddenly, the attic became freezing cold. My breath appeared in front of my face. Then, lightning flashed. For less than a second, the entire world outside turned white. That was when I saw it. A figure was hanging in the air outside my 3rd-floor window. It was tall, too tall. Its body seemed stretched. It wore something that looked like a black Catholic cassock, but the fabric was torn and soaked from the rain. Its shoulders bent forward at an unnatural angle. Where the face should have been, there was only darkness. Not a dark face, not shadow caused by the storm, an empty area of blackness that seemed to swallow the light around it. Then it lifted one hand. The skin was pale. The fingers were too long. The nails were yellow and cracked. It pressed one knuckle against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Frost immediately spread across the window. But the frost formed on the inside. On my side, where its fingers touched the outside, greasy marks appeared in the frost inside the room. I couldn't scream. My throat stopped working. I tried moving backward and caught my foot on my chair. I hit the floor. The figure stayed there, 30 feet above the ground, floating in the rain, watching me. I crawled backward, got to my feet, and ran. I nearly fell down the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached the living room. I stayed against the wall until morning. When the sun rose, the storm was gone. The day was hot and bright. Birds were singing. Everything looked normal. For maybe an hour, I convinced myself it had been a panic attack. Too much caffeine, no sleep, too many hours reading Father Thomas's journal. I eventually went upstairs. I needed to see the window in daylight. It was dry, no frost, no fingerprints. For a moment, I felt relieved. Then I noticed the marks. 3 deep grooves had been carved directly into the glass. Not scratches in dirt, not marks in condensation. The glass itself had been cut. I went straight to Father Thomas's journal. My hands shook as I turned toward the final pages. His last entries were almost impossible to read. The handwriting looked like someone writing during an earthquake. Then I found the final entry. I had somehow missed it before. It had been written only 2 days before Father Thomas disappeared. He said whatever had been growing inside St. Jude's had escaped the confessional. The church could no longer contain it. He said the creature copied the shape of a priest's clothing. But it wasn't a priest. It was made from the hidden cruelty of the parish. All the secret violence. All the guilt. All the sins people had confessed and believed they had left behind. Father Thomas wrote that it could not cross a threshold unless someone looked into its eyes. Looking at it was a form of acknowledgement. Once you met its gaze, your eyes became a doorway. Then it would push the weight of every hidden sin it carried into your mind. You would become its vessel. Then came the warning. If you hear it testing the windows, turn off the lights. Do not look. Do not answer. Father Thomas wrote that it was at his bedroom window while he was finishing the entry. His candle was almost gone. He prayed for mercy because he did not know how much longer he could keep his eyes closed. That was the last thing he wrote. The next 50 pages were blank. Only the final sheet had a circular grease stain on it. It smelled like old candle fat. I spent most of today trying to leave. I packed a bag, or tried to. Every time I walked toward the front door, something strange happened to my body. My arms became heavy. My legs felt weak. A deep exhaustion washed over me. And somewhere in my thoughts, I heard a voice. It didn't sound like me. It sounded smooth, calm, almost comforting. Where would you go? The roads are dangerous. The woods are deep. Stay here. Stay inside. You're safe here. By 6 in the evening, the sky had turned purple. I knew I couldn't leave the power on after sunset. Even a small lamp would create reflections in the windows. I went to the electrical panel and switched off everything. The entire house became silent. The refrigerator stopped. The clocks died. The low electrical hum in the walls disappeared. Then there was nothing except my heartbeat. I dragged my mattress into the center of the living room. I chose that spot because it was as far from the windows as I could get. I wrapped myself in this wool blanket. I brought Father Thomas's journal with me. I don't know why. Maybe because it feels like the closest thing I have to instructions. The sun disappeared behind the trees at 8:42. 5 minutes later, the temperature dropped. It didn't slowly become colder. The cold arrived instantly. 1 second, the room was warm and humid. The next, my breath was visible. At 9:15, something hit the back door. Thud. One heavy impact. I closed my eyes. 10 minutes later, it moved to the kitchen. The window rattled. The iron locks shook. Something was leaning against the glass. Then came the knocking. Tap, tap, tap. After that, it moved to the dining room. Then the bathroom. It has been circling the house, testing every window, every piece of glass, looking for an opening, looking for me. A few minutes ago, it reached the living room. It is behind me right now. The bay window is less than 3 feet away. I can hear the wooden frame bending. Something outside is putting enormous pressure against it. Pieces of old mortar are falling from the bricks. Tap, tap, tap. There are voices too. They are coming through the glass. At first, I thought it was one person whispering. It isn't. It sounds like hundreds, maybe thousands. They speak over one another, crying, begging, confessing. I can hear individual sentences sometimes. I buried the money under the floor. I watched him drink the poison. I left her outside in the woods. I started the fire. I knew what he was doing to the child. The words never stop. They are saying horrible things, old secrets, old crimes, old guilt. Now they are saying my name. They want me to turn around. They want me to see who is talking. They want me to look through the glass. My battery is almost dead. 3%. If anyone knows what I'm supposed to do, I need the answer now. I can't move closer to the walls. The cold near the windows feels solid, like walking into a freezer. I thought staying in the center of the room would protect me. I don't know anymore. The battery just dropped to 1%. This may be the last thing I write. Something has changed. The window cracked. The sound was so loud it felt like a gunshot behind my head. I didn't turn around. I'm still facing the floor. But I felt the air pressure shift. That smell is coming into the room now. Copper, rotting meat, old grease. It is so strong I can taste it. Frost is spreading across the floor. I can hear the boards making small cracking sounds as the ice moves toward me. The voices are no longer whispering. They are screaming. The whole room seems to vibrate. People are confessing to affairs, murders, arson, abuse, things I don't even want to understand. Then, one voice rose above all the others. My voice. It sounded exactly like me. It said a date, October 14. 3 years ago, I stopped breathing. Because I know that date. I remember that night. I remember the storm. I remember driving too fast along a dark county road. I remember something suddenly appearing in front of my headlights. I hit it. Hard, I stopped farther down the road. I sat there shaking. For several seconds, I told myself it had been a deer. Then I looked into the rearview mirror. There was a shape in the ditch. Not a deer, a person. I knew it was a person. I knew. And I drove away. I never called the police. I never told anyone. I spent 3 years telling myself maybe I had imagined it. Maybe someone else found them. Maybe they survived. Maybe it wasn't my responsibility because I had been scared. I buried the memory. I built a life over it. And now my own voice is coming through the broken window, repeating the date. It knows. That thing doesn't only carry the sins of St. Jude's, it finds yours. It finds whatever you hide deepest. It followed the smell of what I did. I didn't need to turn around to see it. My phone screen went dark for a second. The black glass reflected the room behind me. And there it was. The figure from the attic window. The torn black cassock. The impossible height. The empty face. It is standing in the broken window now, leaning inside. Its face is pressed against the remaining shards of glass. The broken pieces are cutting into its skin. There is no blood. The window frame is bending farther inward. I finally understand Father Thomas. It doesn't only want to frighten me. It wants a body, a voice, a mind, a place to put everything it carries. It wants me to become the new container. It wants a chest to sit in, a mouth to speak through. I can feel pressure building inside my head. Not pain exactly, more like memories trying to enter. Images that don't belong to me. A barn burning, a child crying, someone struggling beneath black water, a woman choking after drinking something from a glass, a man digging in frozen earth at night. I can't let all of that inside. I can't carry it. Father Thomas tried to keep the sins contained. The church held them for years. Then the weight became too much. Maybe the only reason the thing exists is because everyone kept hiding what they had done. They confessed in darkness, then walked away pretending nothing happened. The guilt stayed. The truth stayed. The weight stayed. And eventually it became hungry. The voice using my own mouth keeps repeating October 14. It wants me to say it, not just think it. Say what I did. Admit it. Maybe that's what it really wants. Not my death, not my body. The truth. The hidden thing. The secret I refuse to give anyone. The window frame just cracked again. It is closer. I can feel cold air against my neck. I think one of its hands is inside the room. I'm not turning around. I don't want to see its eyes. My phone screen keeps flickering. The battery symbol is red. I don't know how much longer I have. I keep thinking about Father Thomas. All those people gave him their secrets. But confession isn't supposed to be about saying words and forgetting them. You're supposed to be sorry. You're supposed to change. Maybe that's what went wrong here. Maybe St. Jude's became a place where people dumped guilt without accepting responsibility. They treated the church like a trash bin. Father Thomas became the man standing beside that trash bin, watching it grow. And now I've done the same thing. I spent 3 years hiding from what happened. I told myself silence would make it disappear. It didn't. Secrets don't disappear. They wait. The thing behind me is making a sound now, not words. Breathing wet, slow breathing. Except I don't think it has lungs. The voices are still screaming inside it. Hundreds of people. Maybe every person who ever sat inside that confessional. Maybe more. I can hear them calling me a coward. They're right. I ran. Someone was lying in that ditch, and I ran. I don't even know their name. That may be the worst part. For 3 years, I never tried to find out. I was too afraid that knowing would make it real. I'm done hiding. If this phone survives and someone finds it, I need this written down. 3 years ago, on October 14, I was driving on County Route 16 during a storm. I hit someone with my car. I saw them in the ditch. I knew they were human. I drove away. I did not call for help. I did not contact the police. I did not tell anyone. I left them there because I was afraid of what would happen to me. That is the truth. The room just became completely silent. Every voice stopped at once. The cold is still here. The broken window is still behind me. But the screaming stopped. I can hear my own breathing again. In, out, something moved behind me. Very slowly. I'm afraid to check the phone reflection again. But I did. The figure is still there. Its face is no longer pressed against the glass. It is standing upright. Watching, I still can't see actual features. Only that deep black place where a face should be. I expected it to attack. It hasn't. Maybe confession weakens it. Or maybe I'm only giving it exactly what it wanted. I don't know. The voices started again. But they are quieter, one at a time now, not screaming. Speaking, each one says something horrible, then becomes silent. A confession. Then another. And another. It feels different. The pressure inside my head is fading. I don't know whether this is working. My phone is about to die. I need to do one more thing. If I survive tonight, I'm going to the police. I'm going to tell them everything. I'm going to find out who I hit. I don't care what happens to me. Prison, charges, whatever comes next. I should have done it 3 years ago. Maybe that is what the thing has been waiting for. Maybe St. Jude's isn't haunted by sin. Maybe it is haunted by everything people refuse to take responsibility for. The frost is starting to stop. I can hear water dripping somewhere. The window frame is no longer groaning. The figure is still there. It lifted one long hand. For a second, I thought it was reaching toward me. Instead, one pale finger moved toward its own face, then toward me, then toward the floor. I don't understand. Maybe it wants me to keep talking. Maybe saying one secret isn't enough. Maybe it knows every terrible thought I have ever had, every selfish decision, every person I hurt, every lie. If so, I could be here until morning. The screen is flickering again. I'm putting the phone on the floor now. If someone reads this and I'm gone, don't come looking inside the house at night. Do not turn on the lights. Do not look into the windows. And if you hear knocking on the glass, do not look at whatever is making it. More importantly, if there is something you have hidden because admitting it would ruin your life, understand this. Keeping it buried does not make it lighter. The weight has to go somewhere. Father Thomas learned that. The people of Blackwood learned it. I'm learning it now. The thing behind me is leaning forward again. The voices are rising. My own voice has joined them. It is saying the date. October 14. Again, again. So I'm going to stop typing. I'm going to put the phone down. I'm going to open my mouth. And I'm going to tell it everything. Story 4. For the past few weeks, I haven't been able to tell which of my memories are real anymore. At first, it was small things. I would remember leaving my phone on my desk and then find it in the kitchen. I would clearly remember conversations that my parents insisted never happened. Sometimes I would wake up with a strange feeling that an entire day had passed without me being part of it. Then, dates started appearing in my journal that shouldn't exist. April 31st. There is no April 31st. I know that. My phone knows that. Every calendar in the world knows that. But there is an entry in my journal written under that date, and the handwriting is mine. There are other entries, too. Pages filled with things I don't remember writing. Some of them describe events I can remember clearly. Others describe things that feel like dreams until I read them, and then pieces start coming back. The worst part is my younger brother, Nathaniel. Nathaniel is missing. At least, I believe he is. My parents insist I never had a brother. They say I'm an only child. There are no pictures of him anymore. No school records, no clothes, no birthday cards. Nothing. But I remember him. I remember his voice. I remember fighting with him over the television remote. I remember helping him with homework. I remember how he would knock twice on my bedroom wall when he couldn't sleep. I remember Nathaniel. That is why I started keeping this journal in the first place. Writing everything down became the only way I could separate reality from whatever the attic was putting into my head. I'm copying the entries now exactly as I remember finding them. While I still remember what Nathaniel's name means, if I eventually start saying that I never had a brother, don't believe me. It started on April 25th, 2025. My mom asked me to go into the attic and find the old Christmas lights. At least, that is what I remembered happening. It seemed normal at the time. Annoying, but normal. I pulled down the folding ladder and started climbing. The moment I reached the top rung, something changed. I felt happiness. Not ordinary happiness. It was stronger than that. It was a deep, warm feeling that spread through my entire body. For a few seconds, I forgot about everything that had been bothering me. School, arguments with my parents, bills, friendships, growing older, none of it mattered. The attic felt like home. Dust floated through golden light coming from the small windows. Old boxes sat around the floor. Pieces of my childhood were everywhere. There were Barbie dolls with tangled hair, my old pink lava lamp, a box of notebooks from elementary school. Several One Direction posters were still rolled up against the wall, their edges bent with age. I hadn't been in the attic for years, yet almost everything looked exactly the way I remembered it. It felt like the things had been waiting for me. Then I noticed the doors. There were 4 of them along the far wall. I didn't remember those doors. That should have scared me. Instead, I felt curious. Each door was closed. Each looked slightly different from the others, but I couldn't explain exactly how. I called toward the hatch. Nathaniel, come up here. You have to see this. A few seconds later, my little brother appeared at the bottom of the ladder. He looked nervous. Mom said we're not supposed to go up there anymore. I rolled my eyes. She told me to get the Christmas lights. Nathaniel frowned. No, she didn't. Yes, she did. She's at work, Grace. I stared down at him. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. Mom was at work. I knew that. I remembered watching her drive away that morning. But I also remembered her standing in the kitchen less than 10 minutes earlier and asking me to get the Christmas lights. Both memories felt completely real. She asked me, I said. Nathaniel shook his head. She didn't. I forced myself to laugh. Well, I'm already up here, and I found some of our old toys. That caught his attention. Nathaniel hesitated for another moment before climbing the ladder. When he reached the attic floor, he immediately looked uncomfortable. He stayed close to me as we walked toward the 4 doors. Which one should we open? I whispered. None, I laughed. I'm serious, he said. I don't like this place. I ignored him. I reached for the second door from the left. The handle felt strangely warm. When I opened it, the door gave a long, tired creak. Inside was a room filled with presents. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were stacked from the floor almost to the ceiling. Bright wrapping paper, shiny ribbons, glittering bows. Every present had a small tag attached. Grace, Nathaniel, our names were everywhere. I stepped inside. Holy crap. Nathaniel stayed near the doorway. These are for us. I picked up one of the smaller presents. The box felt heavy. Let's open one. Nathaniel shook his head immediately. No. Why? What if it's a trick? A trick from who? He didn't answer. I laughed. Maybe Mom and Dad bought these years ago and forgot about them. Even as I said it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. There were far too many gifts. Some looked brand new. Then we heard something behind the wall. A low sound. Dragging, slow, heavy, like something pulling its body across wooden floorboards. Nathaniel grabbed my hand. The warm, wonderful feeling inside me disappeared instantly. His face went pale. Run. We ran. The next day, Nathaniel barely spoke. We spent most of the morning sitting on the living room floor with blankets around us. Neither of us wanted to admit what had happened. The house felt different. Too quiet. Every small sound made me look toward the hallway leading to the attic. Finally, I asked him, "You saw the presents, right?" He nodded. "And you heard that noise?" Another nod. So I wasn't imagining it. Don't want to talk about it. Nathaniel, I said I don't want to talk about it. His voice broke. That stopped me. I had never seen him so frightened. He looked much younger than he really was, curled beneath the blanket, staring toward the ceiling. I was his older sister. I was supposed to protect him. But underneath my fear was another feeling, the warmth from the attic. It was still inside me. Weak, but there, calling me back. "I want to go up again," I said. Nathaniel stared at me. "Are you insane? I just want to know what's behind the other doors. Did you not hear that thing?" It didn't hurt us. He gave me a look of disbelief. "It just made a noise," I added. "Grace, listen to yourself. That is the dumbest thing you've ever said." I laughed slightly. Nathaniel didn't. "There's something wrong up there," he said. I felt it. I looked at him. Like it knew we were there, like it didn't want us leaving. That silenced me, because I had felt it too. When we ran toward the ladder, the attic had seemed to change. Not physically. It felt as if the room itself had become aware of us, as though it had been holding its breath. Nathaniel grabbed my wrist. "Promise me you won't go back." I wanted to promise. I wanted to mean it. But I didn't. On April 27th, I stayed awake until nearly 2 in the morning. The ceiling fan moved shadows across my bedroom walls. Every sound in the house made my heart jump. Eventually, I gave up trying to sleep. I put on a hoodie. I took my flashlight, a pocket knife, and an old wooden baseball bat from my closet. I walked through the dark hallway. When I passed Nathaniel's room, guilt twisted inside me. I knew what he would say if he saw me. That was exactly why I didn't wake him. I pulled down the attic ladder. The moment I climbed through the hatch, that feeling returned. Warmth, comfort, bliss, the attic welcomed me like an old friend. Dust glowed in my flashlight beam. The air smelled like old wood mixed with something sweet. Vanilla, maybe. I walked past the door with the presents. It was closed again. Perfectly closed. As if Nathaniel and I had never opened it. I moved toward the door on the far right. The handle was warm. I opened it. The smell hit me first. Strawberry shampoo. My mother's perfume. The kind I used to secretly spray on myself when I was a kid. A soft pink light filled the room. Then I saw what was inside. My childhood bedroom. Not similar to it. My actual bedroom. My old canopy bed stood in the corner. Every stuffed animal I used to own was arranged exactly where I remembered keeping them. My rainbow CD player sat on the dresser. Inside it was Taylor Swift's Fearless album. My notebooks were stacked neatly beside my glitter pens. My childhood sketchbooks were open on the desk. Pictures of dresses, animals, characters, all the things I used to draw when I dreamed about becoming an artist. And sitting on the floor was Mary, my doll, my favorite doll. Except Mary shouldn't have existed anymore. Years earlier, my best friend Landry and I had cut off most of her hair. Then, one of her arms broke. Eventually, Mom told me it was time to throw Mary away. I had refused. Instead, I buried her in the backyard. But Mary was sitting in front of me. Perfect, both arms attached. Hair completely restored. She was smiling. Then she blinked. I should have screamed. Instead, I felt happy. Everything in the room was perfect. Better than I remembered. I stepped onto the soft carpet. It smelled like birthday cake. I passed my old mirror. I remembered cracking it in 6th grade. Here it wasn't cracked. My old beanbag chair was there too. The one I begged for on my 10th birthday. I sat on the bed. The princess sheets seemed to move around me. They hugged my body. That sounds impossible, but that is what it felt like. For a few seconds, I thought about staying. Why would I leave? Everything I had loved was here. Nothing was broken. Nothing had been lost. Then, music started playing. A lullaby. Soft at first. I had never heard it before. At least I didn't think I had. But somehow I knew the melody. The music became slower, strangely distorted. Mary's head turned toward me. Her smile disappeared. The pink light changed to red. Pink, red, then came the sound behind the wall. Thud, drag, the walls seemed to pulse. My flashlight flickered. The door slammed shut. I jumped from the bed. Something moved beneath the carpet, a long shape, crawling underneath the floor toward me. I grabbed the door handle. Locked, I slammed my shoulder against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. It burst open. I fell backward onto the attic floor. The music stopped immediately. The pink light vanished. The door was closed again. For several seconds, I just sat there, trying to breathe. Then I saw Mary. She was sitting on the attic floor in front of me. Her smile had returned. In her plastic hand was a photograph. I picked it up. It showed me standing in the attic, exactly where I was standing. The photograph had been taken only seconds earlier. I don't remember returning to my bedroom. One moment, I was looking at Mary. The next, I was beneath my blankets with my clothes still on. My flashlight was in my hand. My bedroom window was open. I knew I hadn't opened it. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By morning, Mary was gone. The photograph was still inside my pocket. At breakfast, Mom was humming while making coffee. Everything seemed completely normal. Nathaniel sat across from me. His eyes were red. He knew. Without saying anything, I wrapped the photograph inside a napkin and passed it beneath the table. Nathaniel opened it. His hands began shaking. "Where did you get this?" "My old doll gave it to me." He immediately stood. "We need to tell Mom." "No, yes, Dad already thinks I've started sleepwalking again." "Mom," Nathaniel said. "Not Dad. Mom knows something. We found her in the laundry room. She was folding towels." "Mom?" She looked up. The moment she saw our faces, she froze. "What happened?" I went back into the attic. The color disappeared from her face. The towel fell from her hands. "Which room?" That question told us everything. You know about the rooms? Which one, Grace? The door on the right. It had my childhood room inside. Mary was there. I handed her the photograph. She barely looked at it. Then she closed her eyes. It's happening again. Nathaniel and I looked at each other. What do you mean again? Mom sat slowly on the washing machine. I was your age when I found the attic. She explained that it looked different when she was young. Smaller, but the same feeling had been there. The same doors, the same impossible rooms. It remembers things, she said. It brings them back. What things? Memories, things you lost, things you miss. Why didn't you tell us? Because I sealed it. I locked every door. I thought it was finished. She looked directly at me. But you opened one. What happens if I keep going back? Mom's face became serious. It learns you. I felt cold. And then you start losing yourself to it. That night, something scratched at my bedroom door. Softly, I pressed my ear against the wood. A whisper came from the hallway. Come back. I told myself I wouldn't. I knew the attic was dangerous. I knew it was doing something to my mind. But the photograph felt hot whenever I carried it. The attic's call had changed. It wasn't warm anymore. It felt hungry. I dreamed about it. I thought about it constantly. And eventually, I went back. On the night of April 30th, it was almost 2 in the morning when I left my bedroom with the flashlight and bat. Nathaniel's door was slightly open. I paused outside. For a moment, I thought about waking him. Then I kept walking. When I entered the attic, I immediately noticed something different. It was colder. The ceiling seemed higher. The room felt larger than before. The 4 doors were still there. One of them had a black handle. I remembered that handle being brass. I opened it. Inside was a maze of mirrors. Tall mirrors. Short mirrors. Antique frames. Cracked glass. Some frames were black with age. Others looked freshly polished. There were no walls. No windows. Just mirrors stretching into darkness. At first, every mirror showed my reflection. Then they began changing. In one, I saw myself smiling. I wore a birthday outfit I never remembered owning. In another, I was crying. Blood ran from my nose. My face was bruised. Then I reached another mirror. Someone was standing behind me. I turned quickly. Nobody. I looked back at the mirror. The figure was still there. I raised my flashlight. The reflection didn't copy my movement. I stepped backward. Something grabbed me. I screamed, "Grace, it's me." "Nathaniel." I nearly collapsed. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I knew you'd come back. You were supposed to stay downstairs. You never told me anything." He looked terrified. "You were going to come up here alone and get yourself killed." I wanted to argue. Then we both noticed the silence. I turned toward the mirror. The dark figure was gone. Nathaniel grabbed my wrist. "We need to leave." We turned. The door had disappeared. There were only mirrors. Every direction looked the same. It was right here. The mirrors began to pulse. Our breath turned white in the freezing air. Then the reflections changed. They weren't showing memories anymore. They showed possibilities. In one mirror, Nathaniel was falling. In another, I was screaming and scratching at a wall. In another, Mary crawled behind me, using one arm while smiling. A low hissing sound filled the maze. "We have to move," Nathaniel whispered. We began pushing through the mirrors. Behind us came footsteps, except they didn't sound like feet. They sounded like long fingernails scraping across glass. I looked behind us. One of the mirrors shattered. Something started crawling through. I never saw enough of it to describe it properly. Long arms, pale skin, something bent in the wrong direction. That was enough. Run. Nathaniel and I sprinted. Glass cracked around us. Mirrors shook. Something followed. I could hear it breathing. Then we found one mirror that wasn't moving. It didn't ripple. It showed only us. No strange versions, no shadows. Just Grace and Nathaniel. Jump through it. Nathaniel stared at me. What? Trust me. I swung the bat. The mirror shattered. I closed my eyes and jumped. Nathaniel followed. We crashed onto the attic floor. The door slammed behind us. Nathaniel covered his ears. I crawled over and put my arms around him. I'm sorry. He didn't answer. Then came April 31st. I know that date doesn't exist, but the entry exists. The handwriting is mine. According to the journal, Dad made pancakes that morning. He hummed while cooking. The radio played old music from the 1980s. Everything felt painfully normal. Nathaniel didn't come down for breakfast. Mom watched me from across the kitchen. Her eyes were red. She looked like she wanted to say something, but eventually she walked away. I spent most of the day cleaning my bedroom. Not really cleaning, just moving things around because I needed to feel like I still had control over something. All day, I thought about Nathaniel, about the mirror room, about how pale he looked after we escaped. After dinner, I finally went to his bedroom. The room was dark, except for a pink salt lamp. Nathaniel? Silence. Can I come in? After a few seconds, he answered. Come in. He was sitting on the floor wearing a hoodie. In his hands was an old walkie-talkie. We used to play with him when we were kids. He kept pressing the button. Click, static, release, click, static. What are you doing? I found it in my closet. The second walkie-talkie was on his nightstand. I picked it up. What are you listening for? He stared at the device. Maybe a version of me that never went into the attic. That scared me more than I wanted to admit. Then he mentioned my old jewelry box. A pink box with a ballerina inside. I saw it in the mirror, he said. I remembered that box vaguely. It wasn't broken, Nathaniel continued. It was perfect. The ballerina was spinning. He looked at me. But I don't think it was my memory. What do you mean? I think it was the attic's memory. We sat quietly. Nathaniel asked if I thought we were supposed to find the mirror room. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it wants to scare us. But sometimes it feels like it's trying to show us something. Maybe, or inviting us. To what? He looked toward the ceiling. To stay. That word remained between us. Stay, Nathaniel looked down at the walkie-talkie again. When we were little, you used to talk to me through these before bed. I remember. You told me stories. Bad stories. He smiled slightly. Dragons, secret tunnels under the backyard. I was trying to make you feel safe. He looked at me. And now, you are the one who doesn't feel safe. I laughed quietly. I don't feel real anymore. Eventually, I took the second walkie-talkie into my room. Before sleeping, I looked at the photograph Mary had given me. Originally, it showed me standing in the attic with a closed door behind me. Now the door in the photograph was open, only slightly. Something stood in the darkness beyond it. The next morning was May 1st. I woke up smelling rain, and something burned. Not fire, more like dust burning on a hot light bulb. Mom was in the living room. An old wooden box sat open in front of her. Inside were letters, photographs, and old albums. She was holding a picture. Mom, she jumped. Then she looked at me and sighed. Come sit down. She handed me a letter. The paper was yellow. The handwriting was old. It was addressed to Mom, from my grandmother. It said that if Mom was reading it, then the attic had opened again. It said the attic always returned when something was broken, and at the bottom was one warning. Please don't forget. Mom told me her mother had experienced the attic too. Maybe even earlier generations had. She showed me a photograph of herself as a little girl standing inside an attic. But the room looked completely different. Warm, comfortable. There were toys. A tea set. Golden light. That's me, Mom said. Then she told me her story. She had discovered the attic as a child. Her mother had forbidden her from going there. One day, Mom found a hidden key. After opening the attic, she couldn't stop returning. The rooms were different for her. One recreated her childhood bedroom. Everything was cleaner than she remembered. Old stuffed animals were repaired. Broken toys became new again. There were drawings on the walls that she didn't remember making. Then came the music room. There was an old record player. It played lullabies, even though it wasn't connected to electricity. Mom would sit in that room for hours. Sometimes she couldn't remember leaving. Eventually, she started seeing other versions of herself. In mirrors, windows, shadows. At first, they looked happy, she said. Then what? They changed. Her voice became quieter. She told me about one final day. She had seen another version of herself standing at the top of the stairs. The other girl smiled. Not kindly. More like she was saying goodbye. Mom ran. She locked the attic. She burned the key. Did that stop it? For a while. Then Mom brought out a cracked music box. It looked like a tiny carousel. She wound it. A lullaby started playing. My entire body went cold. I knew that song. It was the same melody I heard in my childhood bedroom inside the attic. Mom showed me another photograph. My grandmother stood in the attic doorway holding the same music box. I think it's more than a room, Mom said. It uses memories. It takes the things we miss and gives them back prettier than they were. Why? I don't know. She looked at me. But the gift always costs something. Then Mom pulled up her sleeve. A long scar ran from her elbow toward her wrist. I thought I could cut it out. What? The part of me it remembered. She told me that when I was 8 years old, she caught me sleepwalking. I had gone directly to the attic door. I stood there for an hour, eyes open, whispering. I didn't remember any of it. Afterward, Mom made Dad board up the attic entrance. A few days later, Dad forgot why he had done it. That was apparently another thing the attic could do, make people forget. Mom never forgot. That night, I lay awake thinking about Nathaniel. I wondered whether he had already seen another version of himself, a happier version, a version who wanted him to stay. Some part of me already knew the answer. On May 3rd, around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I opened my bedroom door. The attic ladder was down. Nathaniel's shoes were sitting beneath it. Then his voice came from above. You weren't supposed to wake up. Suddenly, I woke in my bed. A dream. At least I thought it was. My window was open. The room was freezing. The house was silent. I grabbed the walkie-talkie. Nathaniel? Static, then a voice. I think I'm inside. I ran. The attic door was open. The ladder was down. Yellow light came from above. Nathaniel. No answer. I climbed. The attic had changed again. It was clean, organized, almost like someone lived there. The boxes had been stacked neatly. Most of the old toys were gone. The 4 doors remained. One stood slightly open. Light came from inside. Then I heard small, quick footsteps. The moment I stepped onto the attic floor, the hatch slammed shut. The attic breathed. That is the only way I can describe it. The air rushed inward, a huge inhale. The open door slammed shut. Every door sealed itself. No lock clicked, no handle moved. They simply became impossible to open. Nathaniel. I grabbed the walkie-talkie. Please answer me. Static, then his voice. It showed me our treehouse. I remembered the old treehouse in our backyard. Dad had torn it down years ago. It isn't real, Nathaniel whispered, but it feels real. Nathaniel, listen to me. I think I want to stay. No. Silence. Then his voice returned. It said, you don't belong here anymore. I stopped breathing. It says you got too old. Nathaniel, it says it's too late for you. The static became louder. But not for me. That was when I understood. The attic had never wanted me. Not really. I had simply been the way inside. It used my memories, my curiosity, my need to return. All of it had been leading Nathaniel there. I'm not leaving without you. I slammed my fists against the door. The light behind it pulsed. Once, twice, then disappeared. Nathaniel stopped answering. I stayed in the attic for what felt like hours. Eventually, the hatch slowly opened behind me. The attic was letting me leave. I didn't want to, but I couldn't open Nathaniel's door. Finally, I climbed down. Mom was waiting in the hallway. He's still inside. She stared at me. He went into one of the rooms. Her face showed nothing except confusion. Who? Nathaniel, Grace, what are you talking about? My brother. Mom approached me carefully. You don't have a brother. That was the last complete entry. More than a year has passed. Today is July 17th, 2026. At least that is what my phone says. There are 6 pages after the May 3rd entry. Most of them are blank. Nathaniel's name is written over and over. Nathaniel, Nathaniel, Nathaniel. The handwriting becomes worse with every page. By the final page, the letters look more like scratches than words. Mom says I am an only child. Dad says the bedroom at the end of the hallway has always been used for storage.